really lovely how many of you are saying good afternoon to us. Thank you so much for joining. It's a very, very busy Tuesday afternoon, I'm sure. I hope the session will be really interesting for all of you.
Yes, good afternoon to everyone. Hi, Seema. How are you?
Hi, Pramath. All well. I was wondering where you were. So our panel, our participants are joining in. They're all saying hello. Some of them are sending a special hello to you, Pramath.
Yeah, hi everyone. It's great to be here. I'm trying to get myself in a comfortable position so that I can be prepared for the grilling, Seema, that you're going to give me.
Yeah, I think my old journalism sort of habits don't go. So we're in the hot seat today, and I think everybody is waiting to take back lots of things. I think some of you
Yep.
are raising a hand. If you have a question, will you please put it in the chat box, please? We're happy to answer any question.
Hi, Suchita. How are you? Listen, some of you are saying that you can't see us. You'll be able to see us exactly at 3 o'clock because we still are 2 minutes away. So we're just waiting for people to join us. So don't worry, you'll be able to see us.
We're just a minute away. I think we'll wait for our team to tell us when to start. All right, we're almost there. Thank you once again, everybody, for joining us this afternoon. We have a very exciting 1 hour coming up. We've also got a... Okay, so we're ready. Good afternoon and welcome to our very, very special edition of our Habit Hour webinar. We are decoding the Harappa habits. Before this, yesterday, we talked about the think habit, and today we are taking the solve habit. I have with me Pramath Raj Sinha. Pramath, hi Pramath. Hi.
Hi, Seema.
Hi. Pramath is the founder and chairperson of Harappa. Pramath is also an institution builder. He's been the founding dean of ISP. I'm sure many of you know about that. And also a founder at Ashoka University. He's a former partner at McKinsey and Company, and Pramath has his hands in many, many things. All of us who work closely with him know that. But he's very, very passionate about education, and he's extremely passionate, I know, about the solve habit. So, but before we start decoding the solve habit, let's have a look at the agenda today so that you know how we are going to take this through. So we're going to talk a little about why problem solving is a very, very important skill as far as future of work is concerned, and what the Harappa solve habit is all about. Pramath's got a case study for us. So you're going to help him solve some of his problems right now, right in this hour at the webinar. We are going to look at least 5 frameworks: the problem definition framework, issue tree, MECE principle, group think, quality, time, and cost triangle. We're also going to do a Q&A. So please let your questions come in. We are very, very happy to answer all questions. And then Pramath is going to share his reading list, things that he really likes reading as far as the problem solving habit is concerned. So let's quickly talk about what problem solving is all about. I'll start with what my experience with this was. So when I came in, this was actually the second course that I built at Harappa. And the real thing that sticks in my mind and stays with me is Pramath telling me that 50% of all problem solving is about problem definition. And I was like, oh my God, that's half the job done. But of course, there's many, many other things to come. But let's talk to Pramath and understand from him why solve is a very, very core habit at Harappa, and why is it a skill that is really, really sought after in the workplace today. Pramath, decode the solve habit for us.
Thank you, Seema. Sorry for tormenting you with the solve habit for the past 1 year since you joined us. My view is that at the workplace, all we are doing is solving problems. Whether it is a problem that has to do with getting a task accomplished, or it is a problem that arises between us and our teammates or bosses, whether it is a problem which our organization has with our customers, we are basically at the workplace only solving problems. We don't realize that, but that's really what you get paid for. That's really what you get evaluated for. That's how you add value. In fact, that's how you move up the ladder in your career and in the hierarchy of an organization. So to me, it is only about problem solving, yet nobody teaches you this stuff any longer.
And Pramath, how does the Harappa solve habit sort of evolve? So we are not just defining a problem, we are also learning how to structure a problem. We are learning how to make a decision. We also talk about how to sort of, create solutions, come up with solutions, and then finally how to implement them. So why did we sort of come up with these 5 sort of things to do with problem solving? How are these critical for us?
So these are all critical pieces of what is expected of us at work, which is not just to solve the problem, but also to get it done, to get the job done, to make sure that the problem actually does get solved and the solution gets implemented. So a lot of problem solving books and courses and training programs take you through the process of actually technically through the process of solving a problem. But you can't just solve a problem in the abstract, in your head or on a piece of paper or in a room full of people in your team. You actually have to take the solution that comes out of that and think about how you are going to implement it, whether or not you are going to implement it. And then once you start implementing it, how do you make sure that you persevere and you get it all done to deliver something that is tangible and measurable? So what we have done at Harappa is actually expanded the notion of problem solving. And I think this has been done really for the first time. Most people don't think about it in this integrated manner. And the insight for me really came, as I was a consultant, I could just come up with very fancy solutions and be done with it. I could wash my hands off it because, hey, I found you an answer, go do it. But as I moved out into the real world, and as you know, I'm a doer now. I like to get things done. You have to go to the decision-making part and the implementation part, which is the unique aspects of the problem solving and the solve habit at Harappa, which we've added.
So Pramath, there was a Bloomberg study, which sort of indicated about 3 years ago or 4 years ago, which said that one skill that the workplace really looks for or employers really look for is creative problem solving. It's supposed to be a very, very desired skill, but it's very, it's not really common. It's not commonly found. Why do you think employers are looking for this skill? What is it about problem solving that really attracts them?
The single most important reason that employers are looking for this is not that suddenly problem solving has appeared at the workplace. Mm-hmm. The reason is that the people they hire are not able to solve the problems as they used to be able to do in the past.
Okay.
This is compounded by the fact that problems have become even more complex, right? So, I mean, you look at the problem we have with the coronavirus, whoever thought that we would have this problem, right? So problems are hitting you literally from the left field.
Correct.
So you need, of course, people, and everybody talks about disruption and so on. So that's cliched. But the underlying problem is that in our education system, we are crammed with knowledge. We are told that the answer is in the back of the book. We are told that the only problems you will solve is the questions that come in the exam or what is in your syllabus. We have stopped teaching people how to go beyond the syllabus, to think beyond the knowledge that they are crammed. And that is really why employers are frustrated, because people walk in and they say, okay, I'm ready to work. You give them a problem and they don't know what to do with it. They say, well, I wasn't taught this. What do I do? Or they go to Google. And the truth is, you are going to get paid for applying your intellect, your experience, your judgment to a problem, not just what you learned in class, but all of these other things which you are not taught. And that's why we have these courses at Harappa. You should have already been taught this at school.
Somebody did ask us that why don't we get, these kind of why are these skills not taught in our education system? So I think you pretty much answered that. And there's someone else who's asking us, are these problem solving skills only relevant for the workplace? Can't we use them in our real life?
Well, I use it in our real life completely. The only place it doesn't work is with my mother and with my wife. And they hate
that's
it.
not fair.
So they hate it. They, don't try it with your partners and your life and your spouses and your family. But yes, beyond that, I think this is a very structured way to approach any problem that you face in your life. To put away emotion, to put away your immediate reactions, to put your biases and impressions away, and to look at things in a very systematic manner. And absolutely, this is a life skill. It's not just a workplace skill. So thank you.
Foundational skill.
Yes.
Okay, so Pramath, let's go in. I believe you have some slides for us and we're all ready for our case study. Can we start?
Yes, so I'm going to start sharing my screen. I hope you all can see it.
Looks okay to me, yes.
All right. So here's a problem I'm dealing with right now. So as you all know, I'm involved in many universities. And if you're guessing which university this is, don't worry. This is happening at every university. So in that sense, it's a fairly generic problem. But it's also a real problem. It's not something that I just thought up or it's contrived. And you can replace the university with your company. I've focused on this whole aspect where suddenly universities have had to pivot or change tack and start providing online learning to their students who have been forced to go home, and courses have to be completed, degrees have to be given, credits have to be earned, and so on. Now, imagine that you are in one of these universities and you are an administrator. You could be the head of the student government or the student council. You're somebody important. And you are called up and said, listen, everyone is unhappy and complaining that things are really not going well. And we are making a hash of it. Please solve this problem. Please do something about this. Now, this is very typical. Often you will be asked whether you're in school or you're in college or you're working, you'll be confronted with situations like this. Something just pops up out of nowhere and you're said, listen, solve the problem. Now, let's see what happens in this situation. And this is, again, like I said, this is something that I've had to live with. So a host of issues keep cropping up, and you start talking to people and you start looking into this. So the question is, are faculty delivering? Are they doing a good job of delivering courses? The other thing, the students are not prepared. If you talk to faculty, they say, our students don't come to class and they are not serious and they are not really ready for online learning. When you talk to students, they will say, well, I'm not getting enough support from the university. I have so many problems. They say the experience, the software, the platform we are using, like a Zoom, is not good enough. There are security issues with this. Then
Don't
they
we
say,
come up
well,
with internet issues, or why should I pay so much to be online?
yes, so that's coming. But
Okay.
hold the pay point. Yes, we haven't come to that yet, and I didn't want to suggest that here. Otherwise,
Okay,
all the
okay.
university people will blame me. But there's questions about group work. How will we do group work? There's general anxiety about what's happening. There's the problems of lockdown. There is mental health issues that people start facing. There's people say, hey, I can't do this at home. My parents are around, my sister's around, my dog is around, my room is not conducive. There's lots of noise. People are saying, well, what's the best technology? I want to use what I want to use. Then students are saying, will we get grades this semester? As you can see, there's just a whole bunch of, there's bandwidth issues that students are having, there are bandwidth issues that faculty are having, their internet is too slow, so when they try to do it, they can't get video, their voice keeps breaking up. Then faculty are worried, how will I deliver examinations online?
That's a big one.
What if people cheat? Then there is a sense that the administration has that the students are not engaged. How do we make sure they come to class? How do we make sure they stay in the class? How many we make sure that they do 5 lectures during the course of a day? Don't they get tired of being on the screen? So as you can see, there's a whole bunch of issues that comes up. There's a question about clashes in the schedule. How do we deal with lab classes and so on? Now, this is very typical, and this is typical for any problem. The first concept that I want to introduce you all to today, which is part of our defining problems course, is this idea that there are 2 types of problems in the world. There are technical problems, and then there are adaptive problems. And then there are a combination of these 2 problems, which are called blended technical and adaptive problems. Now, if you look at technical problems are very simple. Well, they're not always simple, but they're very clear. There are solutions available, there are experts available, and there is not much change or behavior or mindset change that is required. So let's go back to my earlier problems. Now, which of these are technical problems, for example? So student mental health, well, that's not an easy one to solve. Are students prepared? Not easy to solve. But what about bandwidth for students? Well, this is again a technical issue. Where are the students? Who are the ones who have adequate bandwidth? Who only have 3G? Who do only have 2G? Who doesn't have any internet? They are in an internet dark area. This kind of problem has a very technical aspect to it. You can collect data, you can then figure out what the problem is, and you can solve the problem, right? What is the best technology to use? Now, there are about 4 or 5 technologies. There's Google, there's Zoom, there is Microsoft, and maybe a few others. And then within these, you have to pick out the best. You can make some choices and come up with. So these are very technical answers. Talking to an expert will give you. So that these smaller sub-problems are problems that are very technical in nature that can be solved. A good example is if at workplace, if in your office, you have poor access to the internet. Now you can come around and say, listen, I'm not getting enough, my internet speed is very slow, my files don't load fast enough, and so on. But you know that the answer is very simple. You just have to go to the IT person and find out whether there is enough bandwidth to use in the office or not, and you can solve that problem. Adaptive problems, on the other hand, tend to have not a clear answer. There are no experts that can solve it. There is no one answer. And
so would you put something like distraction as an adaptive problem? Student
absolutely.
Yes, maybe yes. Faculty non-delivery or not understanding, or even anxiety, student anxiety, would that be an adaptive problem?
Yes, Seema. So these are all adaptive problems. There is no real answer. Even if you try to solve them, you will best improve, but you will not ever eliminate the problem, right? You will make it better. Now, if you look at this overall problem, it's a combination of some technical problems and some adaptive problems. And that's why we say that the larger problem you're trying to solve is actually a blended problem between technical and adaptive. Now, why is it important to make this distinction? It's important to make this distinction because
Okay.
often at work, we convert technical problems to adaptive problems. It's like doing a self goal, or we often talk about our cricket team when we get frustrated that they snatched defeat from the jaws of victory, right? The example is, if you take the example of the internet in the office, uh, if I ask you to solve the problem, somebody will come back and say, well, the IT guy is not really paying attention. He's not listening. I talked to so and the finance person is saying that, if we do this, then it is going to cost us a lot of money. And, there are other people in the office who don't have this problem. So I don't know if I'm the only one. Now, this is a simple case of checking whether there is a problem with the internet in the office or not. By now bringing all of these people issues and who's saying what and so on, we are making what I call a jalebi out of the problem. There's a very simple problem that has to be solved. So it's important that at the outset, when you start solving a problem, you ask yourself, is it a technical problem? Am I making a technical problem an adaptive problem? And if it is an adaptive problem, truly, then we have to understand how to solve it, how to solve a technical problem and how to solve an adaptive problem. Now, obviously, I don't have enough time to cover this in detail, Seema, but I hope I've given some idea that first and foremost, getting a sense of what is technical, what is adaptive, and what is blended is very important. And that's one aspect that we cover in our problem definition course.
Correct. So once you've sort of figured out that it's an adaptive or a technical problem, then what is the next step that we need to take? You have this beautiful problem definition framework, and you do have 5 sort of
Yeah, so
buckets in that. Will you
again, yeah. So Seema, again, I will use the problem definition. That's the thing that you were referring to in your opening remark. That for me, 50% of solving the problem is to know what problem are we solving. Let me remind you of the time that you walk into a meeting, you think you have some problem to solve, you walk into the meeting and you want to get help from people in the meeting on the problem you're trying to solve. You start telling them about the problem. Even before you finish telling them about the problem, people start giving you advice. They say, no, you should do this. So somebody else says, oh no, but that doesn't work, you should do this. Now, people haven't even understood what is your problem. What is it that you're trying to work on? They start giving the answers. This is a huge problem that we have, where even before we fully understood what we are solving for, we start solving the problem. We feel we are so intelligent. We have to use our brains and we feel like, oh, we have done this before. I know exactly how this is to do. This comes from the high school mentality of being the first to raise the hand and ask the question, or have the right answer when the teacher asks the question. So I've got the answer.
But that's our training, right?
Important. Yes. So we have to fight that. Say, listen, do I really understand what is the problem we are solving? Like I said, you have so many problems. Where do you even start? And so what you do is you force yourself to first write down a problem statement. Here, we came down with the problem statement as how can we provide the same level of experience online as we were able to provide to students on campus. It's a very succinct, clear statement. Same level of experience online as on campus. How can we do that? How can we raise all the level that we are at today to that level where people say, wow, this is almost like being on campus? But that's not enough. The question is, how will we know that we've solved the problem? Right? What will be the measure of success? And this is the other part of this framework. So in this case, we said the only way we are going to measure success is through student feedback. We'll constantly ask our students, how do you think we are doing? How well are we doing?
Okay.
That again is not enough. Once the feedback comes, who will decide whether this is good enough or not? And then the questions turns to stakeholders. It's not just one person who decides. Together, students, faculty, administrators have to take a call. Is this good enough? Have we met the bar? Have we raised the standards? Are we at some benchmark level? Is this the best possible? So being clear about who your stakeholders will be. Finally, what is the scope of the problem? Are we solving for now? Are we solving forever? Are we solving for next year? Are we solving for next semester, for the summer? So here we said, listen, the scope is here and now. All of the classes that are being offered this semester and the experience of all the students who are registered for our courses this semester. And finally, defining what are the constraints? What are the limits within which we have to work? In this case, we said, listen, we need to resolve this in a week. And by the way, with COVID and with all the noise around costs and controlling with the economy going bad and so on, we really have to manage our expenses. We just can't go and pour a lot of money into this. Now, suddenly you can see that from this messy list, we have brought it all down to this very deliberate, thoughtful way of saying, what is the problem I'm trying to solve? Now, everybody who's solving the problem knows this is the problem. This is what we will measure success with. Who will decide what is the scope and what are the constraints? Now, again,
Pramath, can you take 1 minute and explain scope again? Somebody's put up a question saying they don't really get what you mean by scope. You can take a minute and explain that?
Yes, of course. So a scope is saying what is the purview, what is the area within which you will solve this problem, right? So, I'm taking an unpleasant example, but today we have put a lockdown on the country. But now we are saying, so the scope of the lockdown is national. But now we have said, we will allow some easing of services. Kerala has eased up services. The easing up of services within the scope of the geographic boundaries of Kerala is happening. So the scope is only within Kerala, not the rest of the country. Okay. In this case, the scope was that we could have looked at all of the university's courses. We could have looked at the courses to be offered in the future. We could have looked at courses that are going to be offered this summer. We could have looked at courses that are being offered for high school students in the summer and so on. We said, no, we don't care about those things right now. All we care about is this limited number of courses. These 100 courses that are being offered this semester, that's all we are worried about. We are not trying to solve some general problem of online education. We may come up with a quick fix that may not work in the larger scope, but for the 100 courses that we are offering right now, this will work. So that's my scope.
So can scope also be something like a timeline, or does it sort of revolve around that? That's another question that's come up.
I think the timelines are typically come under constraints. But yes, you could have a timeline which says, I mean, I do have a timeline here that, we are talking about just this semester.
Correct.
So you could scope could also be a length of time. But there's another aspect of time that often comes in because people say, I want this problem solved by such and such date, right? And that would be a constraint. So one has to, obviously, this is something that requires some level of thinking and deliberation, that what goes into scope, what goes into constraint, what goes into measures of success. But you know what, once you start to learn how to do this again and again, it almost happens automatically. You don't actually have to take a piece of paper and write these 5 things down. Mentally, you start to form a view as you start to examine the problem. Who is going to evaluate this? Who are the stakeholders? What is the scope? And so on. So this becomes a habit over time.
Okay. I think we should move ahead.
I want to take it. Yeah. So now that you have a problem that is defined, Seema, how am I doing on time? You should keep.
We don't have. We are almost halfway through, Pramath. So
okay, so we are okay.
We have to speed up a little if we have to take questions. There are many.
Okay. Okay. So, right. So we are at about about 3:27. Fine. So you then take the problem and you break it down into, this one will take a few minutes, but the rest of the concepts are shorter. So I'll take a few minutes on this. So now what you do is you have to solve the problem. Now, of course, you can jump into it and you say, okay, let's choose Zoom as a technology. Or you can say, oh, let's provide dongles to every student who doesn't have bandwidth. Or you can say, oh, let's do away with exams this semester completely, right? You jump into the solutions. But before you do that, it's important that if you want to solve this problem right, that you take the larger problem and you break it down into smaller and smaller manageable sub problems. And that these are organized into some sort of a logic, which uses what we call a logic tree or an issue tree. And we call it a tree because it kind of looks like a tree that is lying on its side as it's depicted in this graphic here. So again, let me take this set of issues. Now we have our problem statement, right? Now, how do we break this problem statement down into smaller problem statements and create an issue tree out of it? Now, before we go to issue tree, I want to illustrate our next principle and our fourth principle today, which is called mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive. Okay. Now, mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive can be applied to many areas of our life. But again, without going into too much detail, and there's much more detail about this in our course, let's apply this here and understand how it works. So mutually exclusive means that if you take the smaller problems, then they are very distinct from each other. There is no overlap. Okay. So this is one problem, this is one problem, this is one problem, this is one problem, and they don't overlap. There's no commonality, there's no redundancy between the problems. And I'll illustrate that. But it also means that these sub-problems should fit together so that the entire problem is solved, right? So that there are no gaps left, you see? So how do you solve the problem so that there is no overlap, yet there is completeness in the problem? So the no overlap part is that they are mutually exclusive. They are not inclusive, but they are mutually exclusive. And they are collectively exhaustive. So you put all of them together and they are now collectively exhaustive. So you now go back to this problem statement and you say, well, how do I come up with the next set of issues, right? So Seema, let's see, what are the issues here that are most important? Now, should we start with student anxiety? Well, we could, but then we have the delivery of faculty. Now, that seems like a bigger issue than student anxiety. So let's say we pick faculty as a sub-issue.
Okay.
Now, if we pick faculty as a sub-issue, what else could we pick as a sub-issue? If we pick grades or atmosphere at home, it's a good sub-issue, but it seems like it's a much more detailed sub-issue or next level issue than the faculty issue. But how about students, right? So faculty, students, now that starts to make sense. At that level, we have to solve for how do we make faculty deliver better, and we have to solve for how do we prepare students better.
Would exams come in here somewhere as a main issue, or would that be later?
So we can again take a call, but the exams issue is much more an issue of how do we deliver exams online in a collective, in a credible manner, right?
Okay.
And there's also the grades issue, by the way,
correct,
which is connected to the exams issue.
Yeah.
So for a minute we said, listen, that may be again a second level issue, because the exam issue is really a technology issue. So let's also look at technology as a sub-issue. So to cut a long story short, if you now break it down into sub-issues, that mess of sub-problems, if you look at this, we broke it down into saying, okay, there are some issues with faculty, some issues with students. There are some issues with just the technology per se, right? There are some issues with how well are we providing support to both faculty and students? And then finally, we discovered that there was that, so these, if you will see, are mutually exclusive, right? This has to just to do with faculty. This has just to do with students. This has just to do with the
Correct.
technology that we provide. Not the. This doesn't include the issues of bandwidth of faculty that I'll come to later. And this has to do with the support we provide. Now, as I put these four down, I realized that these were mutually exclusive now, right? But there was something missing. What was missing? Resources was missing, right? Because frankly, that is a big aspect of coming up with a solution to the problem. That, how do I best use the resources I have? I don't have unlimited amounts of people. I don't have unlimited amounts of money. So to make it collectively exhaustive, we add resources to this list. Now this becomes a mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive list.
One question that's coming up again and again from people is, why is engagement not part of a level 1 sub issue, student engagement?
So student engagement could have been a issue, but we found that student engagement is actually a function of many of these issues. It's a function of how well trained the faculty are. It's a function of how good the technology is. It's a function of how good are the students themselves in terms of the atmosphere at home. So we found that, yes, it was an important issue, but it was not mutually exclusive. That's a great question. The issues associated with student engagement are already factored in here. If you add student engagement, then you have the lack of mutual exclusivity in the sub-issues. Now, I can't obviously justify everything and solve this realistically in the time I have, but I just want to let people have a flavor of what it takes to solve the problem, and that this is not just an academic exercise. Now, then you break this further down, right? So you then take each of these and you say, what are the next level issues? And at the next level also, how do we do this in a way that is mutually exclusive and collectively exhaustive? So if you look at what are the problems that are taking place with faculty, there are really three big issues. The first is that they may not have the right laptop, they may not have the right mic, they may not have the right camera. So that's what's here in the technology. The bandwidth is that they may not have the right internet connection, or the Wi-Fi, or the 4G, or the 3G, or just not have internet. And then the third is that they are not trained in using the technology, right? We need to train them to do online learning. So again, as you see, this and this are very different and therefore mutually exclusive. This and this are very different and mutually exclusive. And together they cover all the issues of faculty. And if I have not covered something, we can always add to it.
So I hope that explains the MECE principle, because a lot of people are asking us again and again, what exactly is the MECE principle? Or they are not really grasping it properly. Would you take?
We can take more questions on that later. Seema.
Okay.
But I think the simple way to understand MECE is that think of your wardrobe, right? So typically we have something which we classify as underclothes. So your underwear. There are certain things that you wear only on top. It could be a shirt or a blouse or a kurta. There are only certain things that you wear as bottoms. These days, it's not clear what people are wearing as bottoms when they are on these webinars. There are certain things that you wear only on your feet, right? So if you look at something that is collectively exhaustive, when you need to dress up, right? Collective exhaustive will mean that you will need to have underwear, assuming that all of us do wear underwear. You would have something to wear on top. You will have something to wear on bottom, and you will have something to wear on your feet, right? So now you have everything that you need to be properly attired, right? But shirts and tops are one category, and pants are another category, and underwear is a third category. Now, these are categories that are not overlapping at all. So when you classify these things at home in your wardrobe, you put underwear somewhere, shirt somewhere, a pant somewhere, shoes somewhere. Together they are together they are collectively exhaustive, but individually they are mutually exclusive. Now you may say, well, what about a shawl, right? That also covers my top. Do I put it into shirt or do I create a separate category? Now that's a call you have to take. Do I want to create a mutually exclusive category for shirts and shawls, or I want to put shawls into the shirt category? That's a call you can make. It's how you organize your data. It's a little bit like organizing your books or your wardrobe, right? So again, I can give you many examples, but in the interest of time, I'm going to move on.
Yeah, we need to move on, Pramath.
Yeah. So suddenly, so again, with technology, you can similarly break it out into sub-issues. You could say, what kind of technology should I be using just to deliver the courses, like a Zoom or a Meet or a Google Hangout? What technology should I use to deliver exams? What technology should I do to deliver group work or labs? Right? And then if you combine all of this and you can have sub-issues for each of these, now you have a bunch of issues at the level 2. And similarly, so you can take some of these other issues, some of the remaining issues, and add to it. So I already talked about some of this, that, camera and audio and bandwidth, there should be a line going here. For the course, it said, what live classroom do you use? What LMS do you use? So now you see that a tree is getting formed, right? There's a root, there are these branches, there are these leaves. For each leaf, there are a bunch of sub leaves. For each of these, there's another set of branches, and you grow this whole tree over time. Now what happens is that you realize that to solve the problem, you have to only solve at this sub level. So you say, how do I make sure that for all faculty, they have the right camera, the right audio, and the right bandwidth?
Correct.
For all courses, do I have the right classroom, I have the right LMS, and so on. So that's how you use an issue tree to break a problem down so that you can bring it down to chunks of smaller problems that are easy to solve. Okay. So that kind of covers the issue tree and the MISI framework. If I can move on, Seema, and I'm going through this very quickly. Yes, so very quickly, when you have to take decisions, this is a classic thing that happens. That, okay, now you've taken a decision. Suppose you've taken a decision to go with Zoom, right? A lot of biases and sort of group think creeps in. So there's a bunch of people who will turn around and say, oh, yo, I have used Zoom. It always works, no problem, right? Whereas the fact is that Zoom is not working for many people. It doesn't have some of the security features and so on. Or we'll say, oh no, everybody agrees. Everybody wants to do Zoom. And there are a bunch of faculty who are saying, listen, I don't want to use Zoom. I'm happy with Google. So you're forcing a decision on people. Similarly, sometimes what happens is that you worry, yeah, Pramath likes Zoom, so maybe I should not suggest that we should do Google as well. By the way, in this case, what happened is that we decided that we would go with both Google and Zoom, right? Or if there are some people who are saying, I want to use Google, I don't want to use, what's the problem? You turn around and say, no, why don't you try it out? Give it a shot. You are not open enough. So I think all of these things creep into our decision making, and this is very important to understand also, that these are all kinds of group think that we bring. In our course, we actually teach a lot of other things other than group think that gets in the way of clear decision making. And finally, what I want to do is one very concept that teach the execution part of it. So now when it comes to getting this done, right, the standard thing is, how do you do it at good quality? You do it quickly, and do you do it cost effectively? How do you organize to implement it in that way? So again, if you look at some of the solutions we did, some of our students were not able to have fast internet access where they were. We had to tie up with several telecom providers to figure out what were the areas in particular that these students had problems, what was the best quality of internet available in that area, what was the most cost-effective way of doing it, and how could we deploy it really fast, right? And based on that, we tied up with different providers in different areas where our students were. And there were only 10% of students who were in this problem. So it wasn't a large group of students. We were able to make it a technical problem, coming back to technical and adaptive problems. We were able to reduce it to a technical problem to say, okay, 100 students have a bandwidth issue. Let's break down where they are. In those areas, let's find which is the most cost-effective, strong internet provider, and can we get this deployed quickly? So I'll stop here, Seema. I've tried very quickly to give people a flavor of how do you go from a bunch of disgruntled people complaining that nothing is going well, to breaking the problem down, to applying concepts like technical problems, adaptive problems, problem definition framework, MISI, issue trees, then thinking through things in a clear way so that you are not taking everybody's opinions into account, not imposing some group think onto people, and then finally implementing it in an efficient, high quality, timely manner. That's what the habit is about.
We have lots of questions, and before we go into the questions, I'm going to just ask our team to just put up a quick poll. We just want to know if you'd like to receive more information about our courses. This will just take like 30 seconds, and I have like a whole bunch of questions. We let Pramath quickly drink water and get ready for lots and lots of answering more of our questions. Also, it would be, we have a course called Embrace, which is currently available on our site for anyone to take up and sign up for it. It's called, our site is harappa.education. The course is free as of now, so do try it out and tell us what you think about it. Okay, I think we've almost finished our 30 seconds, and we'll move on with our questions that have come in. So do type in your questions in the chat or in the Q&A box. And I'm going to start. Oh, there's somebody who's already doing a lot of Harappa courses. That's nice. Let's pick up something from the last part, which is about group. This is an interesting question, Pramath. They're asking us, how do you, just a second, how do you tackle groupthink? How do you sort of deal with when everybody wants to think in the same way? How do you sort of be an individual and give your voice out? Isn't it like in the middle where everybody's coming up with a decision, you wanting to have your own say? Wouldn't that be like counterproductive or time consuming?
Yes, of course. I think all of this is seemingly time consuming. In the heat of the moment, you just want to take a quick call and you want to move ahead because there's a premium on solving the problem. But if you don't avoid this, then you end up creating more problems for yourself later. Because suppose we were to just implement Zoom and half the people who are teaching online, faculty, just don't want to take Zoom as a solution, you will not end up solving the problem. There will still be noise. If you remember, we said that all stakeholders have to be satisfied.
Correct.
So it is difficult to then tackle groupthink. That's a good question. I think the way to do that is to just be open and to look at things from multiple perspectives. We teach a concept of balcony at dance in one of our courses. And the whole idea is, separate yourself out from the problem for a minute and see what is going on. If there's a large number of people who are uncomfortable with a particular answer, is there a different answer? So for a long time, we were stuck on the fact that, we have to have only one platform. Only one platform. Everybody should follow the same platform. And then we said, well, there's no problem if we have two platforms. And if that generates a better experience for students, why not have two platforms? And then that completely changed the way we looked at the solution. So again, being open, taking people's views, allowing others to critique you, looking at yourself and saying, hey, am I being objective about this? Are all things that you have to do to avoid groupthink. And if you really want to know how to avoid groupthink, you should take our course.
I was going to say that if you didn't. Okay, there's a former student of mine who's on this webinar, and he's asking us, problem definition gets refined over time. How does the framework take this aspect of, this aspect into account? I mean, everybody can't get into defining a problem and putting it down very quickly. How do you sort of take this into account? How do you improve on this? How do you sort of
Yeah. When you prepare something into a case study like this, the danger is that you oversimplify and you make it sound like it's all very linear. The truth is that it's not linear. One, it's very messy. And the second thing is that it's actually a circular, iterative process. You define the problem, you start putting an issue tree together, you develop some solutions, and you say, aha, maybe I'm solving the wrong problem. Maybe I need to go back. You refine the definition of the problem, then you redefine the issue tree, then so the question is a very pertinent one. And I think the thing to understand that is that this is an iterative process. So your problem definition can change 2-3 times through the course of this process because you discover new things as you go along.
Another interesting question, how is problem solving, Harappa's problem solving definition framework, different from design thinking? Is it?
So there's a lot of commonality in design thinking and problem solving, and design thinking is just another approach to solving problems. In fact, we also teach design thinking as a way to solve problems. So what I just took you through was one way to solve problems. A lot of these concepts actually are incorporated in design thinking, or you could say vice versa.
Okay.
So design thinking often is about being empathetic to what everybody is saying, your users, your stakeholders, your customers, and so on. That was implicit in my overall definition of the problem, right? I had already talked to a lot of people and got all their feedback, and that's why you saw this mass of issues. So I think there's a lot of overlap between design thinking and the way we are approaching it. And we are not saying that ours is better or worse. I think some things lend themselves to a design thinking approach. We ourselves use design thinking to solve problems. Design thinking also has a very strong prototyping element, which is you come up with an answer, you try it and test it, and then you go back and you try it and test it. I think it's much more helpful when user feedback is core to solving a problem. And I think some element of users feedback is important in every problem solving process, but where user feedback is very important, design thinking works much better.
Interesting, Pramath. Somebody's asking us a little bit about balancing quality, time, and cost. The last framework that you showed us. Is there a formula? Is there a way to do it? Can you only do 2 out of 3 at once? How do you think about this?
Well, it's like juggling 3 balls, right? Often what happens is that one of those balls is fixed. So somebody will come and tell you, listen, you only have 1,000 or 10,000 rupees to solve this problem. We cannot spare more money. Or I cannot give you more people. Seema, you and I keep discussing how many people do we need to solve all the problems that we have to solve for in curriculum. So yes, these are all interconnected, and sometimes you just have to fix one and then solve for the other 2. And then what happens is then suddenly you realize that one of those others gets fixed, and then you relax the other the quality. So you may fix cost and you will relax time and quality, and then you say, no, I need to get this done by next week, and I don't care how much it costs, and so you relax the cost constraint. So again, you can, all of these 3 could be moving, or you could fix one and control the other 2, and so on. So I think there's different ways and combinations in which this will work. But again, it really comes down to examples of how you would, what is the context of the problem you're trying to solve.
Very interesting. We've got a question from our Harappa TV, which is basically where we are live streaming this. There's somebody asking us, you spoke about the education system not teaching the essential skill of problem solving. Can you suggest a couple of ways in which high school students can be taught to develop this kind of thinking?
I think the best way in the current setup to get high school students to learn problem solving is to just put them to work on problems. Uh, I have to tell you that while I've had lots of problem solving training as a management consultant, my best training in problem solving came because my father used to give me lots of errands.
Ah.
He was telling me, go do this, go do that. And I used to hate it. I used to wonder, why is he making me do this, right? And I was a young kid at that time. And these were not, exciting problems or anything. But I know that in each of those tasks that I would be given, there would be some complication. Something would not go right. And then I had to solve for it.
Okay.
So I think that's how you learn how to solve problems. If you can't be taught the way we are teaching it, I think that's how you do it. And in again, I was part of my student council, organizing the high school fete, organizing the drama competition. In when I was in IIT, organizing the festival, organizing activities. I think that's where you really learn the life skill of problem solving. And I think if we could have more experiential programs in schools, and one day when Harappa will be available to schools, that's how you'll be able to teach problem solving.
Okay, one last question, and some of the questions have come in, and we'll try and answer them separately in an email and in another way. How do I verify whether my approach to problem solving is correct? I mean, how do I know if I've even, my problem statement itself is incorrect? Is there anything that can give me a clue?
I think the only thing that will give you a clue is that once you start working on the problem, you will start to see that you are not making headway. You will start to get feedback which says you are solving the wrong problem. You will start to see that the issues that you are starting to deal with have nothing to do with what you were trying to solve for. And then you will have to go back. So it's the feedback from the environment that will tell you. There is no other way to test it. And this is
That's
where the
interesting.
design thinking approach comes in, that, you try it, you test it. If it doesn't work, you go back to the design, you come up with something else, and you try it and you test it and you go back.
One more very interesting question, and I know we have it in one of our courses. Can the 5 why technique, the 5 whys technique
Yes.
in problem solving?
Yes. So if you look at the issue tree, it was really about why, right? Why is this happening? Why is that happening? Why is that happening? So you first ask, why is this happening? You say, okay, it's happening because of faculty or students or technology. You say, why is the technology a problem? So you go into that. You say, oh, why is the LMS a problem? Why is the delivery platform a problem? Why is the fact that it cannot do? So yes, absolutely. It's very important to use the why constantly in solving problems.
Another question that's come up: what's the difference between the problem-solving model that we are talking about and the Ishikawa model or the fishbone model? I haven't heard of that one, Pramath.
No, the fishbone is the same as the issue tree, Seema.
Okay,
So
it's issue
yeah,
tree.
yeah. So the fishbone looks like the skeleton of a fish bone, right? So it's very similar. You are actually taking each issue, breaking it down and breaking it down further and breaking it down further. We didn't talk about the whole thing today, but that once you got it, you would prioritize things. You would leave off things on the tree which were less important. And I think that is what that Japanese technique actually does. It's a problem solving tool for getting rid of defects and doing root cause problem solving.
Well, there's a cheeky question here. How do you solve the pricing problem for Harappa courses considering a very competitive online learning market? I think that should be the last question of the day.
Yeah, I think, again, you have to ask the question, so how should you think about pricing? You should think about pricing by looking at the inherent cost of your product. You should look at pricing by looking at what is the value that you're delivering to the learner. You should look at pricing from the lens of what is affordable to our learner. You should look at pricing from the point of view of what does competition offer, which is in comparison, and so on. So very quickly, you have the first level set of sub-issues to that problem. And then you can look at each and break it down further. So if the competition question is an important one, who are our real competition? what are they offering that is comparable to what is being offered on Harappa? What is the pricing? What is the price per hour? How do you see pricing? Is it price based on outcomes? Or so yes, I think this could be applied very much to the pricing problem. And of course, then there are people who will say, oh, it they'll say, I know the answer. And I think that's what we are guarding against. This sort of jumping to an answer without really applying the thinking is what we are guarding against.
Okay, I'll take just one last question. The Sigma provides is a similar kind of tool. What's the
Yes.
difference between Six Sigma and this problem solving?
So Six Sigma is really, again, like the fishbone example. Six Sigma takes and applies this to very specific, the origins of Six Sigma was in quality. So the whole idea of Six Sigma was that if there's a problem, how do you break the problem down and you solve this? So this is the same idea, and we are saying apply this to every problem.
Okay.
Apply to this to the fact that if Seema and I are not working well together, why could that be?
Pramath?
Well, I hope so, but I'm saying that, or why is it that Seema and I work well together? And can we break that down into a fishbone and say, okay, what are the reasons, and can we take these reasons and apply it to other situations? So really, I think the Six Sigma model, if you know how to use the Six Sigma model, or if you know how to use the fishbone model, then please absolutely use it to solve all types of problems, including people problems and relationship problems.
Okay, I think we're almost running out of time, and we had promised our participants that you share your reading list with them. Can we quickly look at some of the books that Pramath recommends if you want to learn more about the Solve habit? These are some of the books. Of these four, which is the top one, Pramath? Which is the one book you would say everybody interested in this should read?
Well, I'm partial to the first one, which is the Bulletproof Problem Solving. It was recently written by my good friend Charles Kahn, who was my colleague at McKinsey, and then he was the head of the Rhodes Scholarship at Oxford University. He's captured all the similar learnings into the book. So I really think that that's the one that I am partial to. But you know what, like I said earlier when I started, your whole approach to solving problems is not complete unless you also master judgment and decision making, which is why I've included books 2 and 3. And finally, that you are able to execute the solutions that you come up with, that you are able to take the decision, the problem solving, the decisions, and actually make it happen. And this book by Ram Charan and Larry Bossidy is almost like a Bible on the subject.
Okay. So we'd like to quickly do a recap of the concepts that you've heard. So every course has at least 7 to 8 concepts. We've only shown you 5. And under the Solve habit, we actually have 5 courses. So it's 8 into 5. There are about 40 concepts almost in these courses. But we've discussed the problem definition framework. Pramath also gave you a glimpse on difference between adaptive and technical problems and blended problems. We talked about issue tree, the Macy principle, groupthink, quality time, and cost effectiveness. These were the 5 frameworks, and he took you through an entire case study. Thank you so much, Pramath, for joining us. I'm sure the participants had a great time, and please do look out. We have 3 more habits to decode as we go along. We have the Harappa communicate habit, which we're going to do with Ravi Shankar Iyer tomorrow. He's one of our faculty for the communicate courses, and he's a storyteller. And we are very, very sure you're going to enjoy that session as well, because we are really going to once again look at some really interesting frameworks and go through a case study and sort of explain everything to you. Thank you so much for joining us. We enjoyed your questions. If you have any requests, please do reach out. Pramath, would you like to say a goodbye?
No, thank you so much for having me, Seema, and thank you so much everybody for joining. It was great fun taking you through the journey of the Solve habit at Harappa, and all I can tell you is that you should give the courses a shot, and I can guarantee it that you will really enjoy it, and this will be a core life skill that you will learn. Thank you again very much for joining us.
All right. Thank you so much.